So welcome. And I know that a lot of you know me. I know some of you do not. And I'm just double checking. Okay, here we go. So let me go over what to expect this evening. So we are going to do introductions. We did a little bit of introductions there in the chat box. Then I'm going to walk you through my Resilient Homestead Roadmap. And then I have some gifts for you, like I said in the email, for those of you who joined live. And I also have an invitation. And then we're going to go into Q&A. And so we're going to do some breakouts and we're going to do some work time. Like I said, this is an interactive workshop. It's not just going to be me talking at you. I want you to get, by the end of this evening, I want you to get something or feel like you've gotten a lot from this workshop. So for those of you who don't know me that well, this is why I do what I do. I love this beautiful planet that we live on. And as human beings, we haven't maybe been so kind to the other beings that live on this planet with us. Not only the animals, but also the landscapes that support these animals. And when I think about why I started my business and why I do what I do, why I plant tomatoes year after year or have a garden, it's because I want to contribute in some way to either increasing biodiversity, increasing habitat, reducing my ecological footprint, and also figuring out a way to be in right relationship with the earth, because we can have a positive impact on this planet if we choose to. So my experience, just for those of you who don't know, I've been gardening in cold climates for 14 years. I've been teaching for 10 years, both gardening, permaculture, and sustainability practices. I've consulted with clients for a decade, and I've been 8 years establishing my own homestead here in Bozeman. I've studied with various different permaculture teachers, Jeff Lawton, Rosemary Morrow, Dave Jackie, and Sepp Holzer, and I've taught with a couple teachers too in different contexts. So that's just a little bit about me. I work with all sorts of people. You know, a lot of them are represented here in this workshop today. I regularly, at least pre-COVID, would hold tours at my site, work parties at my site. I work with couples, I work with individuals, I work with various different clients that want to either figure out how to start a garden because they're new to gardening, or they've been gardening for a while and they need more advice in terms of troubleshooting, or they're wanting the full, you know, integrated homestead or site design. And some of you know this already. My grandmother was a homesteader. My paternal grandmother was a homesteader. She kept a diary from 1943 to 1956 and documented everything she did almost every single day, which was fairly impressive and also very exhausting because she had 6 kids. And so there was common entries about canning, you know, 20 quarts of tomatoes, picking beans, digging up potatoes, all of that. And I feel really fortunate that I had her perspective. But like a lot of people, I did not learn my gardening from my grandmother. How many people can identify with that? How many people had parents or grandparents who gardened? And how many learned from them? Right? Yeah, some of us and some of us not. You know, I learned my gardening from other people, you know, by going to workshops, by learning from other people, but certainly not from my family. So we've kind of lost that connection. We've not only lost that connection of handing down a tradition like that, but we have lost our connection to food, of course. So let me just go back to this presentation. Let's see, where did it go? Hang on. Gotta love the little Zoom things. Everyone can see that again? Thumbs up. Okay. So for those of you who don't know, I live on a 3/4 acre lot in Bozeman, Montana. We have a pond, we have a greenhouse, we have large annual gardens, we have a food forest of fruit trees and berry bushes on our site. These are some of the harvests that we get from our food forest: pears, plums, grapes, apples, strawberries, red currants, a lot of medicinal plants. So even in a cold climate, it's a 3/4 acre lot, so it's a fair amount of space, but we managed to grow a portion of our own food. We also have chickens, and then my husband and stepson are both hunters, and so together with the wild game meat that we get, and the fruit and the eggs and the vegetables from our garden, we can grow a good portion of our own food. So I feel pretty fortunate there. So what I'm going to talk about this evening, and we do have that spectrum, right, applies to all scales. So whether it's that you have acreage, or whether it's that you have a suburban or an urban lot, or whether you have a balcony garden, what I'm going to talk about this evening in terms of that 4-part roadmap will apply at any scale. So that's the beauty of what we're going to be talking about this evening. And I think that what I come back to always is something that one of the co-founders of permaculture said, is that though the problems of the world are increasingly complex, the solutions remain embarrassingly simple. And I think getting back to connecting with the natural world, getting back to growing more of our own food, getting back to creating community, all of those things are not only what build resilience, but are basically a lot of the solutions to some of the big problems that we face. So let's get to know who you all are. I'm going to do breakout rooms, and I would love it if you shared with the people in your group who you are, where you're from, and what's your biggest challenge when it comes to your homestead. So I'm going to stop sharing here. Have you all done breakout groups before on Zoom? Okay, so for those of you who don't, you're going to receive a message that's going to, ask you to be invited to go to a breakout room. So you're going to click on that, and you're going to be taken to this other room where there will be 2 or 3 people in that room, and you'll be able to talk to them. So again, who you are, where you're from, and the biggest challenge that you have when it comes to homesteading. So I'm going to go ahead and set up those breakout rooms. We're going to do, how many of us are there? 48. So
wow.
Let's do, let's see if this, let me check. Yeah, so we're going to do groups. You'll be in groups of 3 or 4. I would love it if anyone would be willing to share what their biggest challenge has been when it comes to their homestead.
I can share.
Yeah.
Good.
Just getting started.
Yes.
That's where I'm at. Is just deer in the headlights. Oh my goodness, there's so much information out there. Now what?
Yes.
And I'm just getting my greenhouse built, and I'm so super excited about it. And it's going to be here in May. And I had a really lovely conversation just now with Barbara Prescott, and she was like, "Oh, you should see if Karen will have a workshop on your property." And it's like, it's like that's where I'm at. I don't know where to start.
Yes.
I'm so excited about getting the greenhouse, and we're in a super windy area. I'm in, west of Livingston, and we're kind of by the wine glass, so we just get howling wind. So anything outside, I'm concerned it's never going to make it.
Yeah.
Because it'll just get blown away. So that's why we're getting this heavy duty, sturdy greenhouse built. But then it's like, now where do I start? Now where do I go? What about my soil? Where do I?
Yes. It's okay.
Oh
it's okay. That's why you're here this evening. This is where you start.
That's right.
Great.
And all these other people are like, okay, newbie, that's me.
Awesome. Anyone else want to share what their biggest challenge has been?
I have 2 black thumbs.
Oh,
Do you think you have 2 black thumbs, or do you know that you have 2 black thumbs?
Let me just say people don't let me babysit their plants.
We'll get you past that. That's
Awesome.
awesome. Maybe one last share.
I have really sandy soil and no organic matter. And I just moved to this soil, and where I'd lived before, I had super clayey soils. And so I was trying to figure out how to deal with super clay. And now I have just sand and no organic. So I have to figure that out.
Great. Okay. Yeah. We can certainly address that in the Q&A as well. Cool. All right, let's get started. So I have in the chat, I have posted a document that if you click on it, you can download it. So it's just the workbook that we're going to use this evening. And if you can't download it, no worries. You don't need it for this evening. It's just an additional help or guide. So you can type directly into that workbook if you want, or you can just go ahead and write in your notebook and just have that as a reference. So if you want to go ahead.
Where in the chat is that? Are other people seeing that? I'm not seeing that.
You're not seeing
No.
it? Okay. Well, maybe it doesn't do it well. I did it while y'all were doing, let me try it again. Maybe it's if you're not in the actual. Oh, I just direct messaged it to you, Phoebe, not to everyone else. Hang on. Oh, the beauty of Zoom. It's uploading right now. So. One moment, please. And so you can just use that as a guide, and that way you don't have to feel like you need to take a bunch of notes. There's information. Is everybody seeing that right now?
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, good. So I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen.
I don't have it yet. I'm sorry.
Do you see it in your chat?
I
No.
don't have it either.
It might be, it's a pretty large document. So, okay, Sarah's got it. And I wouldn't worry too much about it if you can't access it. I will send it as a follow-up as well. It just has some information in it, but everything that's covered is, you'll see on the slides. Who else is having issues with it? Okay, people say they're getting it, but Heather, you haven't gotten it yet?
And I don't have it yet either.
Okay, it might be that it's a bigger document and a bigger file, and
Sure.
it's not coming through. But don't you worry, it's not that important.
Okay, great.
They've got, okay, so grab your notebook and pen, and we're off. So I want to start out by defining what a resilient homestead is, or what a resilient homestead means to me. And for me, it's a site that's designed using permaculture principles. And for those of you who don't know what permaculture is, I'll go into that briefly in just a minute. It's an environment that creates beneficial connections between plants and people. It's a landscape that's able to respond to adverse conditions, and it's a life that can adapt easily to change. So when we're thinking about how to create a resilient homestead, that's what I'm going for, right? And I think that there's been a lot of talk about resilience over the past few years, but especially during this pandemic. How do we remain resilient? What are our resilience practices that aren't only about growing food, but they're about that kind of inner work. How do we keep going when we are confronted by ecological crises or a pandemic, or what you name it. So we want to set up our sites to be as resilient as possible. So like I said, it's a site that's designed using permaculture principles, and permaculture, for those of you who don't know, stands for permanent agriculture or permanent culture. And it's basically a design approach for sustainable living and land use. So what I'm going to be talking about this evening is very much based in the permaculture approach to designing a site. And another way of looking at it is the harmonious integration of landscape and people that provides food, energy, shelter, and other needs in a sustainable way. So what's my Resilient Homestead Roadmap? Well, I define it with the acronym CODE. And so what we're going to be going through tonight is C, clarify your goals. O, observe yourself and your site. D, design on paper. And then E, execute, enhance your skills, and evaluate. And a lot of people, when they think about homesteading, come to me with those questions, right? Of, you know, what's going on with my soil? Where do I start? What's happening with my compost? How do you compost? How do you put seeds in the soil? And where I want you to start is by clarifying your goals. So that's the most important thing. When I go to a client site, I can look at that site, say, and it can be 50 different things. It depends on what your goals are. And then I can tell you, what you should put in. Should you have a greenhouse? Should you have a couple raised beds? Should you have a large annual garden? Should you put in some fruit trees? But clarifying your goals is very important, because we all know if you don't know where you're going, you'll end up someplace else. And so, for those of you who are in the nonprofit world or work for companies, people have an overall vision of what they want to be doing, what a nonprofit is doing, what an organization is doing. The same applies to your homestead. And this is where you'll save a lot of time and money potentially if you can be clear on your goals. When people, ask me, where should I put my greenhouse, or should I have a greenhouse? How many raised beds should I have? Should I bother investing in a fence? All of those questions, I always come back to, well, what are your goals? So I want you to take 5 minutes to answer these questions. So the first question is, what do you want your landscape to do for you? What's your big picture vision? Second question is, what do you hope to achieve? Consider financial stability, quality of life, food production, and then craft a statement of purpose for your project that reflects the future of your system. So obviously this last one might take a little bit of time, right? But just to give you an example, our statement of purpose is, our Broken Ground is creating a cold climate permaculture demonstration site to educate and inspire people how to grow their own food, while at the same time providing a level of self-reliance for myself and my family, right? So that's my statement of purpose. So I know, am I going to put a fence in? Yes, because I'm trying to make this a demonstration site. So I don't want to give all of the food to the deer, right? Am I going to have a fairly extensive garden and orchard area? Yes, because I want to show people the different varieties of things that I can grow in this climate. Now, if your goals are, I want some summer vegetables, that's great. But then your site's gonna look a lot different. So this is where you should start. So just take 5 minutes just to answer these questions on your own. Is everybody clear on that? Okay. So just take 1 minute to finish that up. All right, so I am going to put you back into breakout rooms, and I'd love it if you shared with your group just what your goals are. And if you're not totally clear on those, I wouldn't expect you within the last 5 minutes to have nailed, what your exact goals are. But I think starting from that point, that's, Lori who said, I don't know where to start. This is where you start with your goals. So let's get, I'm going to open up the rooms and I'm going to give you 3 minutes to share what your goals are. Great, welcome back, everybody. Or there's a few more people that are filtering back. Again, like before, I'd love it if anyone were willing to share kind of their statement of purpose for their site.
I'll share. Hannah and I talked a little bit about, we sometimes don't always know if we're going to be around for an entire summer, or maybe we're, taking trips every now and then. So yeah, making kind of a self-sustaining system where we can, and planting maybe some bigger ticket items that can take care of themselves. And then for me personally also, kind of reducing my food waste. I feel like a lot of times I'll like buy a little packet of herbs and then not use the whole thing. And then like, it would be cool to just be able to pick things as I need it and lower the food waste, lower the food transport of buying in a grocery store. Yeah, being more self-sustaining.
Wonderful, wonderful. Yeah, so in your case, I'd recommend that you put in more perennial systems. If you have, perennial edibles, rhubarb, even berry bushes, fruit trees, depending on how much space you have. A lot of herbs are perennial. And then if you don't pick them all, they go to flower. They're beneficial for the pollinators. So that's a great thing to realize, though, that one of your limitations is I want this to be as low maintenance as possible. So that's where, knowing what the goals are is really important. Wonderful. Anyone else want to share their goal for their site?
Share yours.
Oh, so I just said that I want my kids' garden to be a place where they want to spend time, not where they have to spend time. So right now it's just this overwhelming chore that's a thing that they have to check off. And their kids are learning, my grandkids are learning that having a garden is just like, this laborious, horrible thing. So that's my main goal.
I love that. I love that. Yeah. Yeah. How do you make it not drudgery and more enjoyable? Absolutely. And really a lot of it is about, and we'll talk about this a little bit more, it's about systems. It's about creating systems, right? So Liz, when you want a low maintenance system, it's like, oh, okay, so you need some kind of watering system. You need some kind of maintenance system, you know, all of those things to make it a little bit more manageable for people. Let's have one more person share their goal. Heather, I think you were about to. Do you want to unmute yourself?
That would be helpful, huh? I want to grow as much as I can to sustain us without having to buy a lot of groceries. But also I've studied herbalism and I want to grow herbs. I want to have an herb and tree, fruits and berries to grow possibly for market and restaurants. But I'd also like to be able to teach herbal classes here too.
Yay, awesome. Yeah, yeah. So yours is a little bit of a broader goal. And I think that the beauty again about growing herbs too is that they have multiple functions, right? So that they can be used. I have a lot of herbs in my food forest, some of which I use, some of which then just attract pollinators or bring in beauty and aesthetic. And so that's wonderful. Great. So let me share my screen again. And let's move on to the next step. The second part of my roadmap is observing yourself and your site. So what do I mean by this? So the very first thing, and this kind of, we touched on this a little bit, is that you need to know how much time you have to dedicate to your homestead on a daily and a weekly basis. You need to really answer this question and be honest with yourself about this. What sort of budget do you have to work with for establishment and ongoing? And who will be helping you with implementation, maintenance, harvest, and preservation? So these pieces are really important because a site looks different. If a client tells me, I'm going to be in my garden like 2 hours a day, or if they tell me I'm going to be in my garden 2 hours a week, that's going to look, again, that design is going to look a lot different. And so if your overarching goals are a level of self-reliance, but you only have 3 hours a week, then you know that you need to put in a lot of systems to help you with that. Again, budget, what sort of budget do you have to work with? In fact, I actually prefer sometimes if clients have a smaller budget than a big budget to begin with, because if you have a lot of capital up front, what I've seen happen on a lot of sites is that you put in everything and then you're like, oh no, this is a lot of work. And then all of a sudden you're having to hire somebody part-time in perpetuity for the rest of your life to maintain it. So one of the things that I recommend is, again, you're growing into your garden or you're growing into your site. And so you might have a master plan of what that's going to look like over the next 5 years, but you're certainly not putting that all in at once. And then again, this piece of who's going to be helping with implementation, maintenance, harvest, and preservation, those things take time, And so when you have in the fall, when all of this produce is coming in, do you have a way to preserve it so it doesn't go to waste? And so I've been in situations where, I did a consultation for this client, and then, a year later or something, I ran into him. He's like, Kareen, I planted 100 trees on my site, 100 fruit trees. I was like, why? Because I never heard in the consultation that you wanted a commercial orchard, because that's exactly what that is. And I'm not sure what army you have behind you to be able to harvest all of that stuff and preserve it. But again, that gets back to your goals. So just thinking about what do you have? What social system do you have in place to help you with this harvest and preservation? And there's a lot of opportunity in that, right? Beautiful work parties, connections with other people, with neighbors, the ability to gift people food. All of those things are great, but just thinking through that is really important. So keep these, I think for the interest of time, I'm going to have you have these down in your workbook, or just take them down with your notes. Again, I will send this out, and I apologize that some people weren't able to download this. I will send this out in the follow-up with the replay, but take some time to answer these questions when you're after this class. So the other thing that you want to do, you're observing yourself and how much time you have, but then you also want to observe your site and all of the patterns that exist on your site. So where does the water collect? Where do the leaves collect? Where is this, for those of us in cold climates, where is the snow collecting right now on your site? Where does it melt off the quickest? All of the different patterns of what is happening on your site are super important. Where's the prevailing wind? So somebody mentioned that there's a bunch of wind on their site. So knowing all of those things are really important. So you need to know those microclimates, especially in a cold climate. your sun and shade patterns to know where you can grow. Most things, a vegetable garden, ideally you have at least 8 hours of sun a day, if not more. Same with fruit trees. Some things are okay in the shade, depending. What kind of slope do you have? Again, water and wind patterns, and also, you know, what wildlife moves on your property. You know, we have a lot of deer that come onto, come into this area. If you're in a wildlife corridor, you've got to understand that you're either going to have to fence, or maybe there's an area that you're going to have to fence while still allowing the animals to pass through your site. And important as well is the pattern of how you move around the site. If there are areas that you never go to, then don't put stuff there, right? Because you just don't go to those areas. So observing the pattern of how you walk on your land and in your place is really important as well. So that's that. Yeah, clarify your goals, observe your site, and then you want to move to designing on paper. And so what this means is that the first thing that you want to do in your site design is create what's called a base map. So it's important to have kind of a bird's eye view of your property. You want to have the property lines on there. You want to have your critical site features, walkways, clotheslines. If you are on a well and septic, that's really important. Because here, for example, this is a drain field. You don't want to grow anything perennial, any fruit trees or berry bushes or anything over a septic. The best thing to have on a septic area is grass. You want to be aware of where there might be existing irrigation lines, gas lines, dog run, existing trees, garden beds. You want to start with what you have, and then design for what you want as well. But when I'm working with clients, this is, I'm starting with a base map of what's already there. And then what you're going to do is something that's called sector analysis. And this is this is part of that permaculture design approach. You want to know where the summer sun is, right? The winter sun that's lower. Do you have a noise sector on your site? Do you have a scenic view? Do you have winter winds? Where is the prevailing wind? Again, when you do a sector analysis of your site, oftentimes, a lot of clients will come to me and say, I have a blank slate. I have a house and there's a flat yard, and there are no trees. It's a blank slate. And I'm like, well, it really isn't, because if you do a sector analysis of your site, it starts to massage the design, right? So that you know that you want most of your vegetable gardens and your fruit trees in the full sun area. If you have noise here, doesn't mean that you put up a berm, doesn't mean that you put up a hedge. If you have a scenic view, you don't really want to put any fruit trees or ornamental trees in this area to block your view. If you have pollution coming in here, do you again plant that hedge that will prevent a lot of the exhaust from coming onto your site? If you're in an area where there's either genetic drift or somebody sprays right next door to your property, do you want to put something in there to prevent that from happening? With these winter winds, does it mean that you're trying to prevent these winds, or you're putting up a wind turbine? So all of a sudden, when you do this sector analysis, you kind of figure out what you should put where on your site. And then the other thing that you do in permaculture is a zone analysis. So we care for and maintain what we see on a regular basis, right? So if we represent this as concentric circles emanating out from, say, your house, right, which is zone 0, you want to put within, there's no hard and fast rule, but within 20 to 25 feet of your house, you want to put your herb garden. You want to put your kitchen garden. The place that you need daily use and maintenance should be close to your house, if that's possible, right? Your compost pile, things that you go to, especially in a cold climate, tomatoes, right? Lettuce, herbs, all those things that you need regularly and that you need to cover when it's gonna go down to 32 in the middle of June or to 20 in the middle of June, right? This stuff you want close in. Stuff that needs only your weekly use and maintenance can be further out. So that's where you can have winter storage crops, right? So you can put your potatoes or your beets or your carrots or your onions. If they're on irrigation, they can be further out because they grow the entire season. You're not picking them regularly. You're allowing them to grow the entire season before you harvest them. So, and the same thing goes for fruit trees, right? Those can be further out from your site because you don't need to look at them on a regular basis, right? You know, that rhubarb plant or those chives or that apple tree is just happily growing the entire season until you need to harvest it. Then zone 3, this is where, for those of you who have acreage, this is where your grazing animals are, where your forage crops are, your larger ponds. Zone 4 is farm forestry if you do have timber crops, again, if you have acreage. But this could also be on a site where, for example, our Siberian pea shrub hedge kind of acts like a bit of a timber crop, right? Because we prune it back every year. Sometimes we shred that material and we use it in the food forest. Sometimes we use that for our fire, or sometimes we use it to start our, we have a pizza oven, an outdoor pizza oven. So, you know, you can have some of those things on a smaller site, but the scale is a lot different. And then your zone 5 is your wilderness area. So this is an area where you don't manage it, where you go to get inspiration, where on acreage, hopefully your zone 5 is the largest part of your property. This is that conservation easement. This is, you know, you really want your zones of daily use and weekly use to be tight in around the house if possible, and to relieve the rest for the rest of the ecosystem that's going to be supporting what you're creating. So that's the way with the sector analysis and suddenly the zone analysis, you suddenly begin to figure out where to put things on your property. And again, when you talk about maintenance, when you talk about time, putting these things in a very efficient, good location is going to save time and maintenance on your site. So then the final part of the roadmap is executing it, right? Enhancing your skills and then evaluating. And so what this means is you're going to come up with a master plan, right, of your site, and then you want to implement it in phases. So please don't think that you're going to put everything in at once, because that's just crazy making. So over the course of, I'd say with everything that we have on our site, that took, you know, a 5-year long process to put everything in. There's still some things that we want to do, but for the most part, everything that was established. And usually when I'm working with clients and I'm putting in a timeline for implementation, I'm usually assuming that it's going to be 5 years, 3 to 5 years. Again, depending on the scale of their property and the goals that they have for the site. And so that's what I would recommend as well. So that once you have that timeline for implementation, then you can slowly, you know where to start, you know where you're going. And then every year, right, you're enhancing your skills. You're trying a new variety of tomato, or you're putting in a rainwater collection system and you're learning how to do that. But not thinking that you are going to learn all of this stuff in one season and you're going to put all of it in one season. And then there's a principle in permaculture of self-regulating and accepting feedback. Every year you're evaluating what's working and what isn't on your site. So, and understanding too that your design is a dynamic document. So the site plan that you're going to come up with, right, is not what you're going to end up with 5 years from now. Or I'd be surprised if it was. right? Because these are dynamic systems, and also you're going to learn from your system. So you can do a lot of that observation piece at the beginning, but you are going to learn from your system as you actually implement. And so the important thing is to get that feedback and to maybe, you know, make your adjustments as you go along. So what I'd love to hear from you are any questions that you have about that roadmap and what your next best step is. So I'm going to stop sharing. So are there any questions about that roadmap?
I'm curious, Kareen, if our property has a bunch of stuff established. It certainly doesn't follow those zones or that map you showed where you're taking into account all the different factors that you should, like where the sun is and stuff. So I feel a bit tied. Like we have a little orchard. We're not gonna, it's taken years and years. I mean, it was there when we got here, right? So, I mean, do you commonly just have to work around kind of like what's already been established?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. You're not going to move your orchard.
Yeah.
So
not in this lifetime, I'm not.
Right. And so a lot of it is about working within your limitations. Oftentimes that makes us more creative in our design, right? So that if your orchard is in that location, like, is it closer to your house, do you mean, or is it further away?
Well, it's like, yeah, it's right outside the door, right? And it
Right.
takes what would be a really beautiful sunny spot for something else, and it's an orchard between us and the rest of our property.
Right.
Which is fine, but it just, yeah.
Yeah.
And
So
the horses are right outside our door, and the barn is, it's kind of like, oh, that zone map would have been really nice to have before we ever moved here.
Right. Yes, that is another reason why I hope that people find me sooner than later, or if they find permaculture sooner than later, because it does help to design a more efficient system. But with what you have now, it's not that you can't work around that. It's just that you get more imaginative or innovative in terms of how to make that work. And it's about also what in permaculture is called stacking functions. So if you have to go further to your vegetable garden, are there other things that you do along the way? Right? Do you stack other chores along the way to make that make sense? So let's see, any other questions or next best steps for people?
I have a question, Kareen. You've talked a couple of times about systems. Can you just list like an example of like 5 different systems or something so that's clearer in my head?
Yeah, sure. Great question. So irrigation system is one. Do you have a watering system? A social system around how you're maintaining and harvesting your site? Do you have work parties? Do you have friends over? Do you have someone who helps and volunteers? Do you have beers every Friday with friends and they help you with stuff in exchange for food? That's another system. A system of maintenance would also be one. Do you weed your vegetable garden and then on your way back dump those weeds into the chickens and then grab the eggs and then come back? Then take some herbs from your garden and come back inside, right? So setting up those types of systems on your property makes it more efficient, or thinking through some of those. It's not like you're not going to do different things, but that's the idea.
Can I cheat and ask you one practical question?
Sure.
If I didn't have the full budget to get Kareen Erbe to my kids' yard this summer, though I'm working on it, and I had 4 city lots of over-fertilized, overwatered green lawn, is it okay just to let it die? Like, what would be the First step.
A first step for the lawn. Let me think about that.
Okay.
Yeah.
It was kind of cheating to ask you something that practical.
No, it's not cheating, but let me think more about what the best approach is to that.
Thank you, Kareen.
Yeah, no, I will definitely think about that. What are some of your, before I go into giving you the gifts and then just an invitation to you and more Q&A, what are some of the takeaways from this evening? Type them in the chat. A plan, yes. Start small, yes. Make a plan. Yes, observing myself and not my site. I can do this and I don't have to know it all at once. Yeah, so that's really important. Planting on your porch, I'm not alone. Yes, we're never alone. I mean, there is a giant network of people who are interested in growing food even before this pandemic, right? Again, it's like everyone's connected in some way to growing food, and there's a reason for that. You know, that's inherent in us. And so getting support is really important as well. Think big if starting with a blank slate. Yeah. And that's another thing, actually, Amanda. Don't let your site dictate your goals, right? So that if your goal is to be as self-reliant as possible, then we can work with that, right? Don't be like, oh, I have a small site. Not that you have a small site, but for example, be like, oh, I only have an urban site. I can't do very much, right? So before you do that, if your goal is to be as self-reliant as possible, then that means, okay, on that small site, you're going to go vertical. You're going to maybe espalier your trees. You're going to maximize your growing space, and you're going to buy the surplus from your local grower, or you're going to find a neighbor that has more sun space and can help you with the project, right? So don't limit yourself. If that is your goal, don't let the landscape limit the design necessarily, because permaculture also is about life design. So it's not only the design within the landscape that you're on, it's the design of the community and the culture that you're in as well. So right now, let me share my screen again. So there is, you know, and a lot of people touched on it in the takeaways. For me, you know, what I want you to get out of this is to just really be clear on those goals and what that goal is for your site, if you take anything away from this evening. And again, the best thing about this, there are only good things about, you know, connecting with the land and growing your own food. I can't think of a disadvantage of having a garden. And so just, you know, inviting all of you to, even if you're at the very beginning, to take that first step and don't be afraid, and be fine with making mistakes, because you will certainly make them, but the rewards will be much bigger than that. So I have a couple gifts for you that I will send out, because I think I'll put them in the chat, but I will also send them out via email. I'm going to send you my 3 steps to attracting pollinators in your garden, which is just a guide of different species that are beneficial in your garden, and what else you need to do to attract pollinators, because obviously they're a big part of your garden. And then I have the 4-season garden checklist, where I go through what I do every season in the garden, just so that you have both of those things. And then I wanted to take some time. I know that in the email, I talked a little bit about this, that I wanted to give people a sneak peek into my Resilient Homestead program. So I have had a cohort of people that have gone through this program. We're just finishing up here at the end of February. And in fact, one, I think Karen, I don't know if she's still on here, has been participating in the program. And what I'd like to invite you to be part of this program if you're at all interested in taking a deeper dive with me. So what I've found with people is that sometimes it's hard to just do this alone, right? And so this is a group program where you have one-on-one time with me, and you also have group time with people who are part of this cohort, and we develop a site plan and you get the tools and the knowledge to implement it. So it's going to start at the beginning of March, and for once a week from March through April, I'm going to walk you through that roadmap. And then we're going to really get down into some of the nuts and bolts of, what you need in order to start implementing. So everything from kind of learning about soils to learning about food forests to capturing water, etc. And what you get out of that is a comprehensive site plan. And again, I think that what happens with a lot of people is that they get stuck in this process. And what I want to really help clients with is to actually feel like they can start implementing come the spring. So what happens with a lot of people is that they have this on the back burner. And the beauty of going through a program like this is that you have a container and a structure with which to do this. So what's included in it are 8 weekly 2-hour sessions where we go over the relevant content and permaculture principles, whole systems design, homestead practices, and Q&A sessions. There's a like-minded group of people that go through this with you. So we have a homestead community where we strategize about next steps, and then there's a bit of accountability there. And then you have 2 deep dive sessions with me where we go into what your goals are, and then I'm giving and helping you actually come up with the site plan. And then there's the site plan itself that you walk away with. And so with a custom species list and a timeline for implementation. So and a couple bonuses, you get a growing guide, which is me in your inbox from April through October, basically telling you what I'm doing on my homestead. So you get a sense of you come along with me through the growing season. And then there are guest experts that I bring on depending on what the group decides. So we're having someone this week with my existing cohort talk about greenhouse design. We had somebody come in and talk about food preservation. Another person came in and talked about fruit tree health and maintenance. So depending on what people decide, I'm connected obviously to a group of experts in this community and elsewhere that can help with that. So the value is fairly high. If you were to work one-on-one with me, it would cost a bit of money. But again, what I want to get back to is, setting up a homestead and setting up a self-reliance is really kind of priceless, right? Sometimes my parents are like, well, how much money are you putting into your retirement? And da 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 da. I'm like, these fruit trees and these berry bushes, that's my security, right? When it comes down to it. And we've seen this during the pandemic, right? What's important? Food, shelter, clothing, friendships, community. Those are the things that are important, right? And that's why people are freaking out and, buying seeds and wanting to grow more food, because they realize that in the end, that's what's important. So if you do want to join this program, it's $10.49, or you can make 4 payments of $2.99. And I do keep this group fairly small so that it's an intimate group. We get to know one another, and it's also a lot of fun to have that community around you. And then if you do join, if you sign up by February 20th, you can get an extra bonus consultation with me. So if this doesn't feel like the right fit for you in terms of this program, kind of time investment, all of those types of things, then you can work one-on-one with me or have me out to your site to do a one-on-one consultation. I'm more than happy to do that as well. But this is a great container with which to, you know, actually get it done, is, I guess, is the best way to say that. So let me pop, I see that there is stuff in the chat. Oh, Kat says, we had Kareen out to help us design our gardens. Greenhouse Clayman helped us greatly. Well, thank you, Kat. That's very nice. Yes, Sharon, a family can do this together. A couple, I have, how many couples? 2 couples participating right now in it as well. So yeah, it's definitely that's actually the best way to do it. Because then the whole family's on board in terms of their goals and what they want to do for this with their site. And everybody has the buy-in. And if I were to work one-on-one with clients and do a site design for clients, I would ask them to fill out a questionnaire and have everybody participate in that questionnaire. So yeah. Oh, Karen, you're so nice. So Karen is participating in the program, and she said, I've learned so much in Kareen's class. Do you want to say it in person? So I don't have to.
Yes, and I'm not here really as a plug or anything. My husband is here because I learned so much. I wanted him to kind of get a glimpse of what we were doing and learning. But I started this class overwhelmed and just like, wow, where do I begin? But I learned so much with her and with the group of really neat, interesting people. And she, with me, helped design this gorgeous roadmap for part of our yard. And so I am extremely excited and have all sorts of big plans for that part of the yard that I'm going to do over years, not in one season. And I can't say enough, really. It took me from overwhelmed, not sure what to do, to I'm ready and very excited. So I can't say enough good things. Really
well, thank
great.
you, Karen. That's and no, I did not pay Karen to come on.
Nope, she didn't.
I swear.
Didn't. Nope, nope.
Thank God.
Lots of my friends from Billings are here too, so very cool. I want partners in this project, so I'm glad they're all here.
Yay. So I posted a link to learn more about it. I will also post, if you want to book a call, if you're like, I don't know if this is a good fit. I'm also posting the calendar so you can book a call if you're interested to see whether it's the right fit or not. And it might be that we decide, oh, you know, it's better that I just work one-on-one with you. But I think, you know, the beauty of having a group there is, one, like I said, the most awesome people decide to, you know, grow food. You know, that's what I love about my job, is I get to hang out with people that want to grow food and want to make this world a better place and want to connect to the natural world. Plant people are some of the best people. So definitely having that community of support is super, super helpful. So, all right, let's see. What else? Let me see. Oh, and here's, if people just want to do, you know, one-on-one consultations and consultation packages with me, you can check that out as well in the link. So let's open it up for questions. I think, Mike, you have, what are the best sources of seeds and plants? So, so I have a top 5 seed companies that I recommend. First of all, let's go with the national ones, Fedco and Johnny Seeds. But unfortunately, both of those might be overwhelmed right now with demand. Montana companies are the Good Seed Company, and Triple Divide Seeds are also very good. High Mowing Seeds as a national company is also good, and Baker Creek Heirloom Seeds. And Seed Savers Exchange. But all of those right now are, you know, you want to check their websites just to make sure, because a lot of those companies are being overwhelmed as well with seed orders. Yeah. Let's see. And then Lori, you saw I posted in there my consultations in terms of how much to come out. what other questions do we have, either related to the program or related to your site?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is Amanda from Alaska. I'm wondering, in your opinion, what are some of the best ways to increase soil temperature and efficiently in a small, relatively small space? Is it raised beds? Is it mounds? What would be your thoughts on that?
Yeah, raised beds definitely, or you can mound it up, but raised beds, oftentimes you can go higher, right? And then using frost cloth.
Frost cloth.
Yeah, so do you know what I mean by that?
Is that the clear plastic?
No, I would use not the clear plastic, but it's kind of an opaque material that is, the problem with plastic sometimes is that it can burn plants or it can get way too hot in a
Yeah,
situation
heard
like
about
that. So with a frost cloth, it allows the air to breathe, or it allows air in. And so if you just look it up, you can like just Google frost cloth and you'll come up with that. Most garden centers have that, and I would imagine garden centers in Alaska
Yeah.
have that. So if you go there, sometimes they sell it by the linear foot, or sometimes they'll sell it in a package, but that is probably what I would recommend. So raised beds with hoops and frost cloth, you're gonna get growing in there a lot sooner.
Mm-hmm.
Related to that question, I'm wondering about, when you look at when you can start planting and, the soil temperature kind of related to that question. Does it make sense to put, maybe a black visqueen down to help warm up the soil before you even start planting? Or is that sort of out in space?
That's not out in space at all. People do that. I think my hesitation with using black plastic or something like that is then it's just more plastic, and it's sometimes it degrades really quickly. Like frost cloth, you can use it for quite a few seasons, whereas sometimes plastic will degrade more quickly, and then you've got a bunch of plastic. So yeah, but growers certainly do that, but I think I would go the frost cloth route before I did the plastic.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
At the transfer station, I saw that they had free compost, weed-free compost that was free. And I was wondering if it was a good compost to acquire and start my garden with.
Yeah, I don't know. It might be something that if you can call and know what is in it.
Right.
That
Yeah.
would be good. I think one of the issues that we're having now, and again, I mean, this is the opportunity that there is in terms of, when we start connecting with our landscape and connecting with our food, suddenly we have to start to take responsibility for what we're putting in our bodies. And what we're finding is that there's a lot of residual herbicide in both topsoil and in, even in horse manure, in things like that. So it's always an invitation, again, when you start to have a homestead, is to kind of take in that responsibility of knowing your sources. And so I would double check and see where is that. I don't know very much about that transfer station. Well, I don't know anything about that transfer station. So if there's a way that you can call like solid waste management, or just so that you kind of do some due diligence in terms of what's put in there. Because I've talked with too many gardeners who have ruined their gardens with, manure or compost or something that had residual herbicide.
I see. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions?
So Kareen, thinking about your homestead program.
Yes.
This is Chris. I would say I'm an intermediate gardener. Like I had you out to my site a couple of years ago. It was super helpful. So I'm definitely want to plug that. Like I'm pretty good at composting.
Yeah.
But things still feel very piecemeal to me. And And I also like, my last kid is about to leave home, so I can really think about my yard for like this part of my life as opposed to like a trampoline part of my life. So is the homestead group, like, is it mostly geared, like, I feel like it wouldn't be as good of a value if I'm like learning how to compost again, because I've got that, but like I'm not so good at the water parts, and so would you say the level is kind of all over the place, or tell me a little bit about that? Sorry, that's
Right,
not a
there's definitely a
question.
spectrum. Yeah. No, I love how you define it as moving out of the trampoline phase. So all of a sudden you have all this new space for something else. They've got so there's a spectrum of people that are part of it. So from the new gardener to, I'd say, the intermediate. So I do have some clients on there that have took my courses maybe 3 years ago, but are still trying to work out some systems and want something more integrated. That's exactly what it is, right? Is that it feels piecemeal. And that's oftentimes when I come to people's sites, it's that they put some stuff in, but they didn't start with that big picture vision. And so it feels a little bit, So yes, that's definitely true. So, and then if you can't, so for example, if you already know about soils, you don't necessarily have to participate in that session, although there's a benefit also to having that group together. So we're not just like me lecturing, right? It's about breakout sessions. It's about stuff that goes way beyond just growing food. And I think that's when I talk about resilience, what we talk less about is that inner landscape stuff as well, around how do we keep doing this year after year, and how do we set up those systems? How do we keep doing this when, the world is kind of falling apart around us, right? And the way that we do that is that we surround ourselves by people who are also doing it, to know that we aren't alone in this. That there are, when you look at the news, right, you think that it's all bad news. But meanwhile, all of these people got on this call tonight because they want to grow more food. And so there's that kind of, a lot of those intangible benefits from the program as well. So does that answer your question? Awesome. Cool.
Yeah, super helpful. Thanks.
Great. Hannah.
Hi, Kareen. I just have, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I have just a question about, I'm a fairly new gardener, and I tend to take new projects and just want to do it all. And so I'm just looking for a little advice of, with a fairly small space and not much experience, things that you would recommend, starting out with trying to grow, or just things that you would say, don't try to do this as like your first time, your first season gardening. Any advice would be awesome.
Yeah. So you're a new gardener.
Yes.
Yay.
I did a little bit last year. I started some seeds indoors just for fun, and some things came up, and it was just super exciting. And I had a small plot outside shared with neighbors, and so yeah, just looking for some advice of like, these things go well together, but I tried like way too many different things.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
so
the first thing is start small, right?
Yeah.
I would start with 5 different vegetables, right? And easy things, radishes, peas, greens, kale, lettuce, things like that. Beans, bush beans are good. I'd go with maybe some cherry tomatoes. If you're going to try tomatoes, would be fine. And what I recommend for new gardeners is, though you can start things from seed, like tomatoes and broccoli and that stuff, I recommend for new gardeners that you actually just buy those as seedlings from a local grower, or get them at a local nursery, just to make it easier on yourself. Like, again, you want to enhance your skills year after year, but you don't want to you simply just can't become a master gardener in a year, right? And rather than kind of trying everything and then having a lot of failures and then feeling like oh my gosh, I can't do this thing. You just want to start with like five simple vegetables. Squash, zucchini, summer squash is easy as well. So start with a combination of things that you'll direct seed and then things that you can just buy a couple plants from the local growers. That's what I would do.
That's
Yeah,
super
that's
helpful.
exciting.
Thank you.
Yay. So, okay, somebody here said, I love Sarah. She's sitting on her mini indoor trampoline right now. Excellent. That's kind of what I need too. Like pandemic time, you need like a mini trampoline. MSU does not offer soil testing. So other recommendations for soil analysis, it depends on what you're looking for. Midwest Laboratories is a good soil testing laboratory. It's not here. I do also have, there are some places in Butte and Billings. I don't have those up the top of my head. So Glennis, if you want to just email me, I can give you that information. You can, if you're just like starting out and you want a baseline like NPK, main plant nutrients, then I would just there's a soil testing kit that you can buy at a garden center that can test just your nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium and your pH. So that you kind of just know, okay, this is my baseline. But if you need more like heavy metals or the quantity of organic matter or what else is in here, then you can go to something bigger than that, just depending on what's going on with your soil. Oh, nice. Thank you, Adelaide.
Yes, I have a question.
Hang
sorry
on,
to-
I'm just going to get these other questions right here.
Great.
Mike. So Adelaide says Chuck Holman at Earth in Hand in Missoula offers soil testing. Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. Oh, yes, there you go. And Heather says if you contact your local MSU extension, they will send soil samples for testing. See, the hive mind is giving. Thank you very much, Heather. Liz says, what do you have to say about soil amending? What do I do to my soil at the start of the season? Yes. Okay, so again, understanding natural systems, your tomato is nutritious because it's taking nutrients out of the soil. So you do need to add fertility to your soil every season. So I recommend, 2 inches of compost or something like that in your garden a year. You're saying I wouldn't do any kind of synthetic fertilizer. So go with natural fertilizers. Compost obviously is the best option when you're talking about, because it's a slow release into your system. And what you're going for are those beneficial microorganisms as well that help with your soil health.
And is that enough? Like just compost and then maybe like sprinkle some on mid-season or like
right? So it's depending on what you're growing. Yeah, so you want like 2 to 3 inches of compost over your entire garden, and then your heavy feeders like tomatoes or corn or whatever, or winter squash, are going to need some extra fertility throughout the season. Yeah. Mike, you had a question, and then I do want to address, Sharon, your question.
Yeah, and the question is, I'm sure there's differences between county extension master gardener programs around the country.
Yep.
There happens to be one here, which I've sort of looked into. Today, it's all virtual.
Yeah.
Can't understand how you could do that virtually, but I guess they do. So what percent over, I'm already enrolled in your class, as you know. So
yeah.
I've already committed, but a typical master gardener, how much overlap do you see? And should I even bother about wading deeper into the swamp before I know, about the swamp?
Right. Yeah, I would, if I were you, I would hold off on that. Okay. Not that it's great. So you're going to learn you're going to learn slightly different things and different ways of going about it. With a Master Gardener program, there is still a non-organic. So they do teach organic gardening, but they are also teaching just conventional gardening as well. Lot of great information. and you could certainly take it in parallel. That would work. Depends on kind of what kind of time you have as well, and whether you want to overwhelm yourself. So one way of looking at this program is that I'm going to set up kind of the patterns of the overall goals and your site design. Then we're going to go into the details of soil building or water capture, or food forests or whatever. But permaculture is a much more holistic design system, whereas the Master Gardeners is just, you know, how do you garden? Yeah. Let's see. Yes, so comfrey tea is a great option. Olivia asks about adding fertility to soil as well. So if you grow comfrey, you can make a comfrey tea. That's great too. So I think people are starting to drop off here. So I just want to, before everybody drops off, thank you all for spending time with me today. I'll address a few other questions too, if you want, but before everyone drops off, thank you all for spending time with me. It was lovely to have everyone join this evening. I will send the replay along with the 2 gifts. And also, and again, if you want to set up a discovery call with me, let me know. And then here, I'll post that again. If you want more information about the Resilient Homestead program, or you want to have a consultation with me, please be in touch. So lovely, lovely to spend time with all of you gardeners or aspiring gardeners, and stay in touch. And yeah, thanks so much, and we'll see you soon. Sharon, are you still here? Bye.
I am. If I'm the Sharon you're referring
Yes,
to.
you are. So ask me that question again.
So if you had 4 city lots of over-fertilized, low-rooted, high water using grass, what would be your first step with it? Can you just let it go? Or
what do you want to do with it?
So eventually the soil will need to be amended no matter what goes there.
Right.
Right. So is there a first step to start in? I mean, even it was happier just when we quit taking the grass clippings off it last summer. It's so sad. It's such a sad thing. But, you know, so are there other little things like that that we can do to start thinking of the future of the plants that will go there someday, or the trees, or whatever they are?
Yeah, so you could definitely do a compost tea if you wanted to. Spray it with compost tea.
Mhm.
There's a place in town called Organic Lawn and Garden where
Mhm.
Ford Smith can do that for you if you want overall health. I would say that if part of it is going to go into fruit trees and perennial systems, I would say you could leave part of it to die.
Okay.
You know, to die back, because you don't want that grass anyway when you're establishing a food forest or putting in fruit trees and berry bushes. So the weaker that grass is, the better, so that it won't compete. So if there is an area of that space that you anticipate is where, you know, you want to grow some fruit trees and berry bushes, then you could certainly do that and stop watering. You know, again, I'm sure you know this, you know, also like watering deeply and less frequently, but adding compost tea and more organic matter is going to help as well.
So, and just keep mowing it so that it doesn't get to be I mean, because the weeds are the other thing that happens out there because the soil is so poor.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you could try throwing down, although then you're having to, you know, you could throw down stuff like clover, but clover does need some water. And so, you know, that's kind of tricky. But that would be, I think that's what I would recommend. Yeah, keeping it mowed, maybe you don't have to mow it super short, but enough so that you're not spreading any additional thistle or dandelion or whatever. Yeah.
Thank you, Kareen. We need you desperately.
Okay. Well, get in touch.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd love it if you're, is it your son and daughter?
And my 2
In-law?
grandkids. Mhm.
Yeah, yeah, if they wanted to participate, that'd be lovely. Any other questions?
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
I'm getting some chickens this spring, and I'm just kind of curious what you do to chicken-proof aspects of your garden that you maybe don't want them to get into.
Yeah, yeah, so that's a great question. Do you have dogs?
I do have a dog, yeah.
Okay, so you have two options, right? You can either fence the garden or fence them in. You know, so, and if you have a dog, then you may want to have, you know, so we have a house and we have a chicken pen that they can go out to. I also have a movable chicken tractor that I can, you know, move the chickens around to areas of the garden that in the spring or the late fall, I'll put them in the garden because that's when I want them in the garden. And then they're not in the garden at any other time. The other thing that you can do is you can set up a system where you rotate the chickens through a pen system, right? Where they're in this one area for this season, and then next season they're in another area, and the next season, and then that area rotates into your vegetable garden, if that makes sense, right? And then
Yeah, that does.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Any last questions? Great. Well, lovely again to spend time with everybody. Get in touch, look for the replay tomorrow along with the bonuses, and yeah, enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thanks,
Bye,
Kareen.
everybody.
Bye-bye. Thanks so much, Kareen.
You're welcome. Bye.